In the late 15th and early 16th centuries, Europe stood at the threshold of a transformative era, driven by maritime exploration and colonial ambitions. Spain and Portugal emerged as dominant forces, their fleets traversing oceans to claim vast territories in the Americas and beyond. The discovery of new lands by explorers like Christopher Columbus in 1492 unleashed a flood of resources: silver mines in regions like Potosi, gold from Aztec and Inca empires, alongside lucrative trade in spices, sugar, and tragically enslaved people. This influx financed Spain's military campaigns across Europe, the construction of grand architectures, and the maintenance of a sprawling overseas domain. Ordinary Spanish miners toiled under harsh conditions in distant colonies, their labor extracting metals that enriched distant monarchs, while families back home awaited remittances amid economic uncertainties. Yet, this prosperity bred vulnerabilities, as treasure-laden galleons became tempting prizes for rivals. Across the English Channel, England grappled with its own challenges in the 1500s. As a relatively isolated island nation, it lacked the colonial footholds and financial reserves of its Iberian counterparts. Queen Elizabeth I, ascending the throne in 1558 amid religious tensions and threats from Catholic powers, faced a treasury strained by inherited debts and the costs of defending against potential invasions. The English people, from farmers enduring poor harvests to merchants navigating limited markets, felt the pinch of underdevelopment. With direct confrontation against Spain's superior navy seeming suicidal, Elizabeth and her advisors devised an asymmetric approach, sanctioning maritime raids under the guise of legal authority. This strategy not only aimed to disrupt Spanish supply lines, but also to inject much-needed capital into England's coffers, setting the stage for long-term imperial growth. These sanctioned raiders, known as privateers, operated with royal commissions called letters of marque, which authorized attacks on enemy vessels during times of conflict. What began as a defensive tactic evolved into a systematic method of wealth transfer. Captains assembled crews, often desperate seamen drawn from coastal towns, motivated by the allure of shared spoils amid personal hardships like poverty or unemployment. Investors, ranging from affluent merchants to nobility, funded expeditions, viewing them as high-stakes ventures where success could multiply fortunes. The crown claimed a portion of the gains, ensuring state benefits without full accountability. This model mirrored emerging capitalist principles, where risk was distributed but rewards concentrated among the elite, while crews bore the physical dangers of sea battles and disease. One pivotal figure in this era was Francis Drake, whose exploits exemplified the blend of exploration and predation. Born around 1540 into a modest Protestant family in Devon, Drake rose through naval ranks, fueled by ambition and resentment towards Spanish Catholicism after personal losses in earlier voyages. In 1577, he embarked on an expedition ostensibly for discovery, but its core objective was intercepting Spanish shipments along the Pacific coast of South America. Crew members, enduring grueling months at sea with scant provisions, shared in the tensions of pursuit and combat. The climax occurred in 1579 when Drake's forces overpowered the galleon Nuestra Señora de la Concepción, laden with silver bars, coins, gold artifacts, and other valuables equivalent to vast sums in contemporary terms. Transferring the cargo took days, straining the ships and men alike. Upon returning to England in 1580, despite losses en route, the haul yielded extraordinary returns, enough to alleviate national fiscal pressures. Elizabeth, under the weight of governing a divided realm, personally honored Drake with knighthood aboard his vessel, the Golden Hind, symbolizing how such acts bolstered royal prestige and economic stability. Drake's campaigns extended beyond isolated captures. By 1585, amid escalating Anglo-Spanish hostilities, he led assaults on key colonial outposts in the Caribbean and Florida. In Santo Domingo, residents, merchants, artisans, and enslaved workers faced terror as buildings were ransacked and torched, disrupting local economies and instilling lasting fear of foreign incursions. Similar devastation struck Cartagena and St. Augustine, where settlers rebuilt amid ruins, their ambitions for prosperous new lives shattered by the violence. These operations not only sapped Spanish morale, but also demonstrated England's growing naval prowess, foreshadowing the defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588, a turning point that allowed Britain to challenge Iberian hegemony more openly. As the 17th century dawned, the practice continued under figures like Henry Morgan, who embodied the transition from rogue adventurer to imperial administrator. Morgan, a Welshman who arrived in the Caribbean as an indentured servant in the 1650s, climbed through ranks by capitalizing on the chaotic opportunities of colonial frontiers. In 1671, during a period of fragile peace between England and Spain, he orchestrated the overland assault on Panama City. His band of buccaneers, hardened by jungle treks and skirmishes, overwhelmed defenses, leading to the city's pillage. Treasures, piles of silver, gems, textiles, and human captives were carted away, leaving inhabitants in despair as flames consumed their homes and livelihoods. Morgan's arrest upon return to England was a diplomatic formality. Instead of execution, he received acclaim, a knighthood, and appointment as Lieutenant Governor of Jamaica. This trajectory highlighted how privateering served as a stepping stone for personal advancement, while ordinary participants grappled with the moral ambiguities and physical tolls of their actions. The economic framework underpinning these activities was meticulously structured. Expeditions demanded upfront capital for outfitting vessels and recruiting personnel, often sourced from London's burgeoning merchant class eager for diversification. Upon success, distributions followed a hierarchical model: royal taxes first, then investor payouts, with residuals divided among leaders and crew. This system injected liquidity into England's markets, enabling investments in shipbuilding, trade networks, and military enhancements. For common folk, such as dock workers handling incoming cargoes or families receiving shares from sailor relatives, it offered fleeting prosperity amid broader inequalities. Over time, the constant drain on Spanish resources eroded their imperial cohesion, contributing to internal rebellions and fiscal crises that weakened their global standing. In the long view, this era of state-endorsed predation laid foundations for Britain's ascent. The accumulated capital financed expansions into North America, Asia, and Africa, evolving from outright seizure to institutionalized extraction. By the early 1600s, entities like the East India Company received charters granting quasi-sovereign powers, levying duties, forging alliances, and even waging conflicts to dominate trade routes. This shift masked violence in commercial veneers, yet perpetuated the core dynamic of wealth outflow from colonies to metropole. Colonists in these new territories, from Indian weavers to African farmers, experienced the burdens of monopolistic controls, their daily struggles intensified by distant policies that prioritized English gains. Reflecting on broader implications, this history reveals enduring patterns in global finance and power. Leaders, pressured by fiscal shortfalls, have historically outsourced contentious operations to maintain plausible deniability, echoing modern uses of contractors in conflicts or economic sanctions against adversaries. For individuals, the era underscores vulnerabilities: traders facing disrupted routes, workers in plundered cities rebuilding from scratch, or English investors riding waves of uncertainty. True security, then as now, lies in resilient assets beyond institutional whims, such as diversified skills or tangible holdings resistant to devaluation. The narrative of Britain's rise illustrates how economic dominance often stems from strategic opportunism rather than equitable exchange. By harnessing private initiative for national ends, England not only overcame immediate constraints, but also set precedents for centuries of imperial influence, shaping global trade and finance in ways that continue to resonate. For more deep, carefully researched stories from economic history, subscribe to our channel, Einstein of Economy.